The NSPCC reckons that 1 in 20 children in the UK have been sexually abused. And according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women worldwide will experience violence in their lifetime, most likely at the hands of someone they know. Although there seems to be a lot of high-profile cases in the media, in churches in the UK there have been significant reductions in reported cases of child sexual abuse, particularly for current cases. There has been a rise in reports of sexual, spiritual and domestic abuse among adults. Perhaps that's to do with better awareness and reporting, or a growing vocabulary that gives us language to articulate what is wrong, or a sense that now is a safer time and our churches are a safer place to tell the truth. Safeguarding Sunday, championed by the charity 318, is Sunday the 16th of November 2025, and today I'm talking to Peter Wright about why a church would want to take part in using their worship and teaching resources for this Sunday. Peter Wright is Head of Strategic Communications at 318, the UK's leading independent Christian safeguarding charity, where he spent the last 8 years raising awareness and changing public perceptions of safeguarding in Christian faith and charity spaces. Originally from southwest London and now living in Kent with his wife and family, Peter also gives his time to causes he cares deeply about, volunteering to support families of children with speech and language challenges, serving as a school governor, and leading children's ministry in his local Baptist church. In terms of a trigger warning about the content of this podcast, although we discuss the topic of abuse and sexual abuse, and more specifically about what we can do to protect the vulnerable and be a safe place, there are no personal stories or details shared, and the conversation is centred more on churches becoming safer places. Thanks for joining us on the Roots for Churches podcast. Here we go. Welcome, Peter, to the Roots for Churches podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Melanie. Thank you for inviting me.
That's all right. So we've got a meaty subject today. We're going to explore the concept of safeguarding and particularly Safeguarding Sunday. I wonder if you could just give us a little introduction to yourself and how you got involved in working with 318 on.
Yeah, of course. So, my name's Peter and I'm Head of Strategic Communications for the charity 318. That's a Christian independent safeguarding charity. It's been around almost 50 years now, working with churches and safeguarding. My background wasn't in safeguarding, it was in charity comms. So it was a whole background in how we communicate issues and topics of things like justice, human rights, all those kind of really topics that are important to me as a Christian, really. I came to it seeing the idea of child protection, so protecting children from harm within the Christian context as being something like a marriage made in heaven, really. Obviously, those two subjects go together, passion for the kingdom, a passion for children's protection being quite an easy sell, really, and sort of walked into it, I suppose, quite naively. Since then, been there just over 8 years, and learned the whole history of child protection within faith and within Christian circumstances, and the dark parts, and also the positive stories that are out there, and how that's evolved and how that's progressed, and just really seen it as part of Christ's mission for the church, God's vision for his church to be a place of safety, to be a place of security, to be a place of sanctuary for people. But that stuff doesn't happen by accident. We have to actually really work at making that happen. So understanding how we can do that has been really, really eye-opening for me.
I guess it would be fair to say that, like, safeguarding as a thing, like, I'm thinking about my childhood, that wasn't a word any of us used.
Yeah,
Definitely
no,
wasn't
that's true.
something that happened in church. Well, it wasn't a safe place necessarily where I was, but we just didn't have that word. We didn't have the framework, and it just wasn't talked about. So can you give us a bit of, like, what's changed? Like, how has this evolved? How has this grown into where we've got to today?
I think you're right. I think for me and for most people's experience probably is at the point when people get involved in church, begin to volunteer, and you're asked to do a background check of some description. And for most people, that tends to be their first kind of road in, and what is this? What is this about? And then obviously, particularly if you're volunteering with children, you might be asked to do safeguarding training, and suddenly you're opened up into this whole area that maybe you didn't have much of an understanding of. So it's quite common for people to be thrown into this thing and think, what is this? What is this about? And I think for churches in particular, but not just the church, across society, we've had some really big things happen. Inquiries, government level inquiries, a lot of stories and cases coming out that have come from people's experience, people's bad experience of being in places of vulnerability, being in church where they've been hurt and harmed, but other situations as well. And I think this really has come about where we're beginning to learn that actually, if we don't have these safeguards in place, we don't have this framework for creating those safe places in place, what can actually happen and what can happen as a result. I mean, one of the things that we do know is it can often take up to 20, maybe 30 years before someone who was abused gets to a position where they're able to speak out and tell people about their story. So lots of the things we're hearing about have that kind of time span associated with it. So, but now we're beginning to see actually, if we had had certain things in place, if there were certain things we could have done that could have prevented that harm and abuse from happening. So really, I think it's a process of learning from past mistakes, learning from things that have happened, the bravery of people to come forward and share their stories, listening to those, and trying to put some of those things into practice.
So, yeah, that idea that, it takes until you're quite an adult and probably not in that situation or even geography anymore to get to the point where you feel safe enough to say something. But if we could somehow put policies in place to prevent sort of situations where abuse could happen, but also if you can create a culture where that's just not tolerated, or that's not even the way we operate, then perhaps if something does go wrong, somebody could catch it or say something earlier, and then you could prevent harm spreading. So we know that we can't prevent everything bad happening in the world, but you're right, it's like we could change the culture, or we could maybe get a bit closer to creating safer spaces. And I guess that's what this whole idea of safeguarding, that safe part in the word, is that we hope that we are creating safety for all the people who are in our care, those who are vulnerable, those who are children, but all of us really, that we feel safe from control, from manipulation, from abuse in all those levels. So tell me a little bit about Safeguarding Sunday. So how long has Safeguarding Sunday been a thing?
So we're holding it in November. It happens in November each year. So this year on the 16th of November. And this will be its 7th year. So we've been running it a little while. It first started as a little pilot we ran with, I think it was something like 20 or 30 churches. It was really small. And it really just came about from churches saying, look, we've got all this stuff in place. We've got our people trained. We've got our policy, but people don't really know what we're doing. And we'd like a way of being able to talk about this in the context of church, in a way that fits with our Bible teaching, our theology, allows us to share what we're doing. And so we kind of worked with a small group of churches to say, okay, what could we do? How could we help? So as a charity supporting over 6,000 churches, we said this is probably something we can support with. So that's how it sort of began, and it's progressed year on year. So last year, we just over 5,000 churches taking part, and just dedicating one Sunday a year to say, this is what we're doing. This is how it fits with God's heart for the church. This is how it fits with mission. And these are the sorts of people you can speak to if you have problems. And also to get a sense that this is everyone's responsibility. So safeguarding isn't just the responsibility of the minister. It's not the responsibility of the council or the youth leaders. Actually, we all have a part to play in making our churches safer. We each have a different role to play, but we each have a responsibility to help make that church a really good, positive place to go and experience faith. So that's kind of where it came from. It's the usual sorts of things people expect. So it's got sermon notes, we've got hymn suggestions, we've got prayers, everything you need to run a service, whether it's just sort of 5-minute slot or whether you can dedicate the whole service. There's a flexibility there for people to do that, and appreciating that every church is different. Every church has a different style, a different way of doing things. So hopefully there's enough flexibility in there to allow you to sort of just think about, how might I tackle this subject in a way that's positive for us. But at its heart, it's really about local churches. So it's about the local church telling their people what they are doing. So here at my church, you speak to this person. Here at my church, you go here and do that. So really making it really local and specific, so people within the congregation know how they can engage with it.
Brilliant. So it's sort of two-pronged. One is helping people align safeguarding with theology, with God's values, with God's heart, and then really practically, this is what it looks like here on the ground in our church. And Roots helped with some of the writing for some of the resources, and it was like, how can we do a communion service that has to do with safeguarding? It was quite a fun, like writers creating worship to think about that, because you don't think communion and safeguarding when you put them together.
No, that's right.
And same with singing worship songs. You don't always think, how do I sing about safeguarding? But we do think about the faithfulness and the safety of God.
And that's the thing. So I think words like safeguarding, child protection, they don't appear in the Bible. Jesus didn't talk about how can we safeguard, but he did demonstrate that through the way that he invited the children to come to him, how he talked about how serious it was if people harmed children, how he dealt with vulnerable people like the woman who was bleeding or the woman at the well, how he approached people who were downtrodden in society, who didn't have a voice, and how he made space for that. And that's just the ministry of Jesus. But all through Scripture, it talks about how we are to care for the vulnerable, how we are to speak up for those who have no voice. And that at its heart is what safeguarding is about. It's about making space that those that are at risk of harm can be protected, and how the church is part of that solution. So there's so much in the Bible, isn't there, about justice, about care for the orphans, about speaking up for those who have no voice. So all those themes are there, and it's really rich. There's so much in the Psalms, in songs that we sing, about how we can demonstrate that in the way that we worship and the way that we live. So it is there. It just may not be using those words that we're used to.
Yeah, and we often in our teaching say, here's a word and it's in Scripture, but it's quite old-fashioned, but it means this, and we apply it. So it isn't, I don't think it's too far of a jump that God our refuge, God our safe place, that, and the God, who cares for the widows and orphans, that it's not a big jump from that to safeguarding. Yeah. But I think people might think about this and go, Safeguarding Sunday, the immediate thought is maybe sexual abuse or sexual abuse scandals in the church. And they go, gosh, isn't that a bit heavy? Do we actually want to raise that? Shouldn't we be keeping that a bit quiet? Like, if people are new to church, we don't want to be the kind of church that goes, oh, don't forget about, sexual abuse scandals.
Yeah.
It feels a bit counterintuitive somehow if people are new to church that we would perhaps raise this and spend a whole Sunday talking about it. How would you sort of push back if you're getting that kind of resistance?
I think we wouldn't necessarily push back. We'd say, well, yeah, we understand. We get it. It is a heavy subject. It can be difficult to know where to start. We have to recognize that there are people who have been damaged and hurt, not just in church, but outside as well, who will be in the congregation. Approaching it with sensitivity and with careful thought is really important. So we wouldn't say just bolt up the front and start talking about it. Actually, think about how you're going to approach this sensitively. You will know the congregation you're working. You'll know the people that you're worshiping with. So to pitch it in that way, I think. For us, it's not just about cases of abuse in the church. I mean, any church that's working in a community setting, if they're running some sort of mission or outreach, you're going to encounter people in society who have encountered some sort of harm or abuse, have those sorts of experiences. But responding well to abuse doesn't just mean to those within the congregation, but it's with anybody. Most churches will have these things in place. They'll have their policy. They'll have their people who have trained. They'll have work they're doing on their culture. So really, it's more about not raising a topic out of the blue, but more just sharing what your church is already doing, sharing the things you've got in place. Because as we know, you can have the best policy in the world, you have the best training, you can have the people all prepared to respond. If the people you're caring for, the children, vulnerable adults, anybody in the congregation, if they don't know who they can go to or who they can speak to with concerns of what the process might be or what that might look like, it's really going to be not effective. So part of good safeguarding is raising awareness amongst everybody, so you all know what's expected, you all know where you can go, who you can speak to, and that just increases the likelihood that we can create places that are safe for everybody.
Because I am just thinking, like, statistically, it's like 1 in 4 people have experienced some sort of sexual abuse. So if you're thinking about your congregation on a Sunday, that's quite a high proportion, and you don't want to trigger people. So there's something about letting people know ahead of time that this is happening and these topics will be raised, so they can make good choices themselves and make sure that they feel safe. But also maybe saying, if people have come forward and you already know about it, perhaps involving them in the conversation so they have a sense of empowerment and, this is what we're planning on doing. This isn't going to come out of the blue at you. You have a bit of control in this situation. Know what the narrative's going to be and how we're going to talk about this. Because as you say, we want to talk about safeguarding and some of these issues with everybody in the church, potentially even the children. And so some people might be like, oh goodness, I feel a bit dated. I know my parents' generation didn't really enjoy talking about sex at all. So even having like a sex talk with their children or teenagers was a big thing. So to then sort of talk about sex in a church building in front of God, it feels like the levels of taboo are rising and rising. And I can imagine a lot of vicars. I had a great chat with a woman who was in Northern Ireland, and she was talking about, when was the last time you heard her talk about sex in church?
Yeah, it's true.
So if we're not even just talking about healthy relationships and that kind of thing, and then to talk about safeguarding, the only thing we're talking about in this area is when it goes wrong. It can feel like, hey, we need to just take the taboo off of this and really talk about this. But that feels challenging for, I think, a lot of people culturally, or just from their own personal background. They've not had it modeled to them.
No, exactly. And that's part of the vision for the resources, really. It's to equip people to do that. So you don't have to know how to do it. You don't have to have the words. We've done them for you. We've written prayers, we've written sermon notes. It's there, so you can take what we've done, and you can either use it off the shelf as it is, or you can bring in your own experience, your own thoughts, your own tradition that you're within, because it can be a complex topic. But what we tend to look at is kind of two things. One is, rather than solely focusing on the awful, horrific stuff that's happened, what if we imagined what the church would look like if it got things right? What would the church look like if it was caring for people, if it was responding to those in need? What does that church look like? And that actually becomes a really exciting vision of the Holy Spirit-filled church, caring, protecting, speaking up, championing the cause of the vulnerable. And so when you begin to think what that could look like for us in our local context, that becomes a really, I think, quite inspiring conversation. So as well as not sweeping the hard things under the carpet, I know, making sure we do acknowledge the hurt and harm that's happened, but thinking about what could we look like if we were a truly safe place for everybody that came in through the door. So that's one thing that we try to encourage people to do. And then the other thing also is about the key part of the day, really, is about reminding people that they have responsibility to speak up. And then really it's about how they can use their voice, that they will be listened to, they will be believed, and who they can speak to and who they can raise concerns with. So whether you're a child, whether you're a young person, whether you're an older person, that is true for everybody. So knowing if you have concerns, if you have worries, where you can take those and what you can do with them, that's relevant for everybody. So that's kind of the emphasis of the day, really, is taking people through, again, in my local church setting with our people, what do we have in place? What can you do? Who do you go to? Who do you speak to? Where's the information? Really equipping people to play their part in making your church safer for everybody.
Yeah, I really like that. I guess I'm reflecting on the fact that, we didn't used to have language for a lot of this. So some of the wording around this, or even sometimes I look at some of these scandals that come up in the newspapers and think, we're judging people's behavior now by our standards. But back then, the world was different. There weren't those standards. Now, that doesn't excuse their behavior, but now we have something to call it. Whereas back then we didn't. And I think that's really hard, because sometimes if you can't articulate or you can't put your finger on this is what that is and this is why it's wrong, it's hard to tell somebody. What are you telling them? I feel weird. I feel weird around this. I feel uncomfortable. And that is definitely something to say. I've talked to my children. I'm like, trust your gut. If you're feeling uncomfortable at this, there's something definitely going on, and you should just get yourself safe, and we'll work it out later once you're safe. But again, once you start to understand these things of what is abuse or what is control, but I do think we are growing in our language around it. And so sometimes having these conversations allows us to give common language to a group of people. But yeah, it's very important and very empowering, but it doesn't feel fun. It doesn't feel
and that, you used the word earlier, culture. And that is one of the key things, is churches trying to create a culture where people are allowed to question, where they're allowed to ask, why is this the way it is the way things should be, where people are allowed to appropriately challenge the way things are done, so that those things around creating space for people to ask those sorts of questions and feel confident that those sorts of questions are welcomed and encouraged. That's all part of it as well. I think that's part of it. You can say, like you say, this doesn't quite feel right to me. Is what we're doing here, is that right? But be allowed to do that, to be encouraged to speak up and to question, is also part of it as well.
And I think being aware of power dynamics. So, whether you're a child telling on another adult, or saying that you feel uncomfortable, there's a big step to be able to say that to an adult to feel safe enough. But equally, it could be a cultural thing as well. So different cultures have different approaches to leadership. And so there may be a sort of a preference for honoring leadership to the point where you never disagree with them, or you would never confront or raise a complaint to a leader directly. So how do our churches accommodate the many different cultures that are present in our congregations? We might be like, well, it's really democratic. You just go and talk to this person. Look, they're safe. But, whether they're a man or a woman or they're white or they're black, would people feel safe going to that person? Does that person have more leadership? Or are they on staff at the church and therefore that makes them feel unsafe? So it's kind of allowing our churches and our conversations to have these, like, stew on these a bit and go, okay, we've put this in place, but is it working? And is it really safe?
That's right, and that's what we found. So last year, the last couple of years for the campaign, we've focused on the one particular theme, and last year the theme was "Let's talk about it," and that was exactly that. It's that let's just have a conversation. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to necessarily be able to know exactly what all this stuff means, but let's at least create space to talk about this thing, to kind of allow people to share their experiences, whether it's in church or outside of church, and that was really, really impactful. We had so many stories from people who said, this is the first time I've talked to you about this. It's the first time I've thought about this as an issue.
Yeah.
This is the first time I actually get why this stuff's important. Churches are places quite unique in our societies whose doors are just open to anybody. Anybody can come in, walk off the street, and be part of that congregation, that community. And that's quite unique. And so for people to be able to have a conversation around risk and what that means and how we manage that well is really important. And this year we've kind of moved on from let's talk about it. And this year is what action can we take? So the theme being actions speak louder. So actually, let's do more than just talk. Let's think about those things we can now, what we've learned and what we've said and what we've understood. Let's do something to kind of address those and to take that forward.
No, it's really helpful. So what about people who are thinking about this Safeguarding Sunday and they're like, I just wish we didn't have to do all this. I just wish we could get on with doing the mission of the church so we could love people, serve people, tell people about Jesus. Should we really be spending a whole Sunday talking about this? Can't we talk about the gospel? Is this hoops that we have to jump through? I know I've had conversations with sort of children's and youth leaders, and they all know the purpose and point of safeguarding, but it can feel sometimes like safeguarding says no. Like safeguarding says it's too risky. Safeguarding says you can't go to their house. You can't do this, you can't do that. And it feels like we had more creativity or more maybe spontaneity when we didn't have to have all these policies and we didn't have to DBS check everybody to the nth degree. And there can be an element of like, gosh, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. And we can see the point, but I wish it didn't have to be this way. So is safeguarding a barrier to mission?
I get why people would say that. But actually, safeguarding is part of mission. I think we spoke earlier about the way Jesus treated people, the way he engaged with the poor, the things he spoke about. Actually, safeguarding its heart, which is about protecting the vulnerable, is the gospel. It is creating a space where the poor are released from bondage and all those things that we talk about as part of the gospel message. That's what safeguarding is. So it is part of mission. I think there are other things we do as church that we don't question. One of the really interesting things we're looking at through the work of 3018 at the moment is things like mandatory reporting of abuse. Now, the finance industry has that around fraud. You think about the way you protect money, the things you have to do to make sure you report your finances, you have your accounts audited, all the things that we just take for granted. We don't complain about that. We just get on with it. Health and safety, making sure we've got first aid kits in place, making sure we've got insurance, all that stuff. We just do it because we're used to it. So it's no different from any of those other things. This is about learning from past experiences, learning where the vulnerabilities of a community are that put people at risk at hurt and harm. And there are things we can do to stop that, to prevent that from happening, or where it does happen, respond well. So that's all it is. And so some of the resources we produced for this campaign really tackle that. And we've got a really, really cool little video we've made with the guys at Forefront Theatre talking about, if you're taking cakes out of the oven, use oven gloves. If you ride a bike, you put a helmet on. I mean, it's no different from all that sort of stuff. It's just stuff where we know there's a risk, but we can do something to keep ourselves safe. And if we knew there was a risk, why would we not do something to stop that risk from happening? particularly when it concerns children and the most vulnerable in our society. It doesn't take much effort. It just takes a bit of thought and forward planning. Schools get it. Other people working in sport, they already are in that world. We have teachers that come in to do youth work, and they're like, well, where's your safeguarding stuff? They're just used to it. It's normal for them. It might not feel normal for us yet as churches completely, but we'll get there. And we see so many churches who do get it right, who are working really hard to embed this stuff to a level where people just expect it. We send our kids to school. You expect it to be a safe place. Why would you not have any different expectations for going to church or going to an after-school club? It should be the same.
Yeah, and I think church is one of those settings that is unique. And we talk about this often in church leadership. It's like you are their leader, but then you're your peer and a friend and you socialize with them. There's not many jobs where you take your children to work with you, but church leaders do. That church is a community. So church is very much more than a Sunday meeting. It's what happens all week long. You meet people in church and you think they're good people because they're in church, they must love Jesus, their values, whether they're good or not, whether their actions weigh up to that. But if you've met them in church, it kind of is a stamp of approval. So there is something about church that is different to school, is different to, I don't know, work settings where we just follow the rules. And I suppose some of those things could be said about school. If you see your teacher from primary school in the supermarket, there's protocols for that, and the teachers are not going to go to the child's house. But all this that we've really thought this through. But I do think church is a bit different, and that's where the safeguarding is really, really important, because it's not all during official church meetings where these things are happening, and we can have policies, ratios with children, but it's the relationships that happen in and around church that are important. And that's where we really need everybody in the church to get it about safeguarding. And because you can't police all of those conversations, those meetings, those running into somebody on the street. So that's where we really need the church to act like community and look out for people and keep them safe. And yes, we can have policies that take those into account, but this is why I think it can't just be the minister or the safeguarding appointed person. It really needs to be all of us doing it and all of us knowing what to look out for.
That's true. I mean, we talk a lot about the church as family, about being a family. We don't talk about that in other sort of other contexts particularly. And I remember myself growing up in church, we called everybody auntie and uncle, and to the point where I really didn't know what the difference was between, auntie so-and-so in church versus an auntie in my family. It was really confusing for a child to understand what those relationships sort of meant and how they played out. And there's a lot of value in that. There's a lot of beauty in that as well. So what we're not talking about is taking things so that the church is so tied down that we can't do that sort of work, because church is built on relationship. Jesus' ministry and the ministry of the church is all about relationship. It's about coming alongside people. It's about living your life alongside others and sharing life experiences. So it's not about saying we don't want to be that and we don't want to mirror that. It's just understanding that does come with risks, but those risks can be mitigated. There are things we can do to make sure those risks are managed in a safe way. So understanding, if you're going to visit someone, are you doing it in the role as a church member, or are you doing it as a friend? Understand that there are differences there. So, and appreciating the subtleties within that. But that's why the role of safeguarding coordinator, safeguarding lead within the church is so important. And often it's really an unsung role.
Heroic.
So it's the person that stands up at church meetings and says, I don't think we can do that. And everyone rolls their eyes, but their role is so crucial, because what they are doing, they are that check and that balance. They're saying, actually, hang on, this doesn't sound safe. There are better ways we could do this. Have we thought of? We should be doing it a different way. And they really are people that should be listened to, that need our support and our prayers. And part of what's in the resources is an opportunity to pray for your safeguarding lead. We've had so many leads who have come back to us and said that it was a really emotional part of the service. I've done this job for 3, 5, 10 years, and to be able to stood up there and be prayed for and to say, look, we know what you're carrying, we know the work you do, we value you, is really important. So again, take the opportunity to say to those people that are working in our churches to make safeguarding work, thank you, we acknowledge you, what you're doing is really important for us. It's a great thing we can do as well.
I mean, I feel like if churches do almost nothing else on Safeguarding Sunday, that would be a really good thing. Because it's heavy, whether it's a paid person or a volunteer, it can be a heavy load. And you're making these judgment calls and you have policies to follow, but it's heavy. It's heavy knowing you're trying to keep people safe. Yeah. So if people are, obviously they can go to safeguardingsunday.org and download the resources and get a whole variety of things, so they can use all of it or some of it, find things that fit their flavour of church.
Mm-hmm.
But if they think, okay, actually, listening to this, we would like to go a step further. We want to either review our safeguarding, can we get some help with that? Or we want to teach our children and young people a bit more about this. Have you got some resources or help that you can signpost people to?
Absolutely. So firstly, if you are thinking of doing that, great, well done. That's a really good thing you can do. We are committed to, if you sign up to register for the campaign, that's not a way of us bombarding you with sales emails for the rest of your life. The reason we ask people to register is we want to be able to tell the good news story of how many churches are actually participating. So it's really important just to know that those numbers. Register for the site, get the information. We do have two other resources that'd be great if I could just talk to you a little bit about. Our first one is a new resource that we just recently relaunched, actually called Raise Your Roar, and it features the character of a lion, and it's about teaching children to speak up with confidence. So to roar, to raise their roar, and when are good opportunities to speak up, where they can do that, why they might want to do that. And we have a 6-week program of materials that churches can run as part of their youth and children's ministry. And we take them through Bible stories where children in the Bible have used their voice to speak up to kings and princes and whoever. And it's a really fun, engaged sorts of sessions that allow children to explore that sense of, well, God's given me a voice and I can use it for myself, and also to speak up for others as well. So Raise Your Roar is there. And also, as a membership organisation, we support over 10,000 organisations. Most of those are churches, but also faith-based charities and businesses as well with safeguarding. So whether it's an audit, whether it's a review of your policy, if your staff need really high quality training, that's there. So anything you need for safeguarding within the faith context, do check out our website and see if there's a way that we can help you, and think about becoming a member with us.
Brilliant. And does it matter what denomination, what background church people are from? Should they be connected to their own local church? I mean, their own denomination safeguarding, or can they come to you as well? How does that work?
It's a mixture. Really, we're there for churches that don't have anything at all. So if you're a church that has no access to any support, come and check us out. Equally, if you've got good support through your denomination, then that's excellent. We can always supplement it with training. We have a lot of free resources as well that are there. So have a look, see what's there, have a browse, and just find what you need to make yourselves as safe as you can be.
And lastly, I wonder if you could help me with a query. What does the 318 actually mean? Like, what are the numbers about? Is it your postcode? Is it your phone number?
As people probably can guess, it is a reference to a passage in the Bible.
Yeah.
So this is Proverbs 31:8, which talks about being a voice for the voiceless and for speaking up for those who are vulnerable. Because that's, as we mentioned, that's what safeguarding is. It's not the policies, it's not the training, it's not all that stuff. It is the heart for people who are vulnerable and people that need our care and support, and taking action to make their world safer and to fulfill our mission to speak up. So that's where it's come from. It's Proverbs 31:8.
Brilliant.
Go read it. It's a great passage.
It is a good passage. I can imagine a good sermon on that.
It features in our resources, I think, which you wrote. So thank you.
Thanks. So thank you, Peter, and thank you for raising awareness on this topic and helping churches to get better at this. I really, really appreciate it. So Safeguarding Sunday is when is it? The 5th?
It's the 16th of November. The reason we do it in November is because it coincides with the National Adult Safeguarding Week, which is observed across the UK, but also National Safeguarding Week in Wales. So we pinpoint the 16th of November. But if that date is difficult, if you can't hold it on the 16th of November, that's absolutely fine. Pick a date that works for you. It could be Easter. It could be any time of year. Just pick a date that works. The resources will still be there for you to use. But Sunday, the 16th of November is the date that we're kind of promoting.
And as you said about Wales, the resources are also available in Welsh language. So if you're a Welsh language church, or you want to do some things bilingually in Wales, check it out and get those resources. And I think there's lots of things, and the hymns and the prayers, etc., will all be in Welsh. I think some of the posters as well. So
that's correct. Yeah,
we're getting multilingual. Right. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Peter. It's been really fascinating.
Likewise, and just pray for all the churches taking part, that it would be really blessing for them, and that their sense of safety and their sense of calling to be a place of safety for people, that they really realise that through this event. So yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity to come and speak to you.
Amen. Thanks, Peter. Brilliant. I hope you'll take a look at the Safeguarding Sunday resources on their website, safeguardingsunday.org. Ruth's writers and editors were part of shaping some of those resources, and it was wonderful to work in partnership together ecumenically. You can find links to the Raise Your Roar children's and youth resources and 318 support for churches in the show notes. Roots produce resources to help you lead great church, from intergenerational Sunday worship to children and youth groups, community outreach events, toddler groups, Bible studies. We've got a resource to help you. Search by lectionary week or by Bible passage. Head to rootsforchurches.com to take out a free trial. You can explore digital or add-on or stunning full-colour magazines that help you prepare and share offline. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share with leaders in your church and network, and leave us a review, as that helps others find it. Together, we can grow.